All right, so I have a large list of topics that I want to talk about in FL Studio. And I don't know if anyone's really going to watch this video, but regardless, I'm going to make it because it's something I'm interested in and I enjoy making it. So I make content that makes, that I like to make and not what other people like to see. And if they like it after I make it, then that's a bonus. So, um, yeah. And I hope that other people who make YouTube videos do that as well. Because it gets kind of, depressing when you make stuff for other people because trying to satisfy everyone else. Whereas if you just make stuff because you like to make it, then it becomes less work and more fun, I guess. So, I didn't know I can do this. I was just kind of messing with this as I was talking, the maximum height thing. I'm going to set this back though. So, uh, yeah, I just wrote off like a checklist right next to me of like things I could go through. One of them, I'm gonna turn this off. Minimum height is much better. So, yeah, so we're in a checklist. And the first thing on this checklist is about oscillator clicking. So, actually, here, before I even do this, I'm gonna start every time I go in FL Studio. Usually I don't use templates because the only thing is, like, templates are cool. I guess I should probably use them, but I always start from scratch because I want to, experiment with different ways of doing things. So I just go with an empty template every time. And yeah, it takes a lot more work out of me, but and I also put a limiter on the master, right away to make sure that like harmful noises aren't gonna bleed into my ears and possibly break my eardrums. Yeah, I feel like that's pretty good to do. So, anyways, oscillation clicking, or synth clicking, I guess. So let me get some visuals out here. I guess I'll put this after because then that'd be a true display of the waveform if I put it after all of the effects. So if let's do some spectrum. You can see the spectrum up here too in a different way. And I think I could, what is the plugin? I always forget the name of this plugin every single time. And then I gotta like find it. M Analyzer? No, it's not that. It's a name that I never remember. Span. Like, how would I know that that's a spectrum analyzer? So you can see the spectrum here. You can see the spectrum here. You can see it here. You got multiple different ways to see. You know what? That's just all of the spectrum, We're all over the spectrum. So you got a sine wave, right? So you notice the very beginning of the sound, right? See that? It's a ton of frequencies in the beginning. So in the frequency, usually a sine wave is just one isolated note, partial in the frequency spectrum. But you see that we're getting a ton of extra frequencies in the very beginning. But if I hold out the note, see that we're not getting those frequencies really, but only at the beginning and kind of at the end a little bit. So if you don't like that, unless you want to keep the transients and that's a desired sound, and you might want to do that depending on the sound you're making. I don't personally like that, so what I like to do, let's go like this and then set a little tiny release, like tiny little bit of release. So now that we don't get all that clickiness in the beginning. And it kind of, I don't know if it really cuts it off at the end, but we don't get as many frequencies starting in the beginning. And that's a little bit too much attack because that sounded kind of weird. Maybe I'll put a little less. Yeah, to me, that looks much smoother. I like to do that to a lot of my sounds. It's a little tiny little detail that I like to do. So yeah, let's get more into waveforms. So the different kinds of waveforms. So a sine wave is, like I said, one frequency in the frequency spectrum. Kind of annoying, I guess, just by itself. Well, I don't think it's really annoying. But so that's just one frequency in the whole frequency spectrum, whereas a saw wave is every multiple of the fundamental frequency. The fundamental is like the very bottom frequency, usually. Not always. Sometimes you can put like frequencies under the fundamental. I guess technically the fundamental is, or that might be another name for it, is just the note you hear, or it's the I can't think of the name of it, but there's like a predominant frequency that determines what note it is, right? And that's usually mainly just the loudest note and not necessarily the bottom note. It's so the note that you notice the most. It's can't maybe not even the loudest, because your ears are weird and hear things at different volumes. Like lower notes actually sound a little quieter to our ears, and we're more sensitive to higher frequencies than we are to lower frequencies. And some frequencies we're really sensitive to, like the 4K. That hurts our ears. So usually people cut around 4K. But I'm getting a little off task. So the base frequency, the fundamental frequency, and then you multiply it by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, by 7, by 8. And you keep doing that process until you go all the way up the frequency spectrum. Kind of. You don't go all the way up, but you notice if I play a higher note, look at see how the lower end is kind of cut off as I play the higher notes? But then if I play a super low note, so it only goes up to a certain point. If I play a super low note, it doesn't seem to actually cut off the high end, which is kind of interesting to know. But if I play a super high note, it's really annoying. All of that low end content kind of gets removed. So it's kind of like creating a low pass filter-ish, like as you're going up. But so yeah, that's all of the harmonics content. Whereas a square wave is very similar to a saw. It's the same exact thing as this. You notice some, if I play a higher note, you notice some of that weird extra frequency content in the higher notes. But if I turn the high quality on, there's not that extra frequency content. Sometimes people like that extra frequency content. Sometimes people don't. I think it gives more of like the extra content gives more of like a classic like synth vibe. I think that's the reason for it. But anyways, these are all, those partials, and the square is very similar to the saw, but every even harmonic is taken out and you're only left with the odd. So saw, you can see that they have a lot of the same partials, but yeah, like I said, every other partial is taken out. I think it's either all the even or the odds are taken out. I think it's the odds that are taken out. No, the evens. That's right. I was right the first time, the evens. And then, triangle is kind of like similar to those two, but even less frequency content. And I don't really mess with this. This is in some old school oscillators. So yeah. Now there's something else I want to get into here, and it comes down to somewhat. There's a good way to display this is in Serum, and that's phase cancellation. So if I have two sine waves, so when I look at this waveform, right? This is plus, goes to 0 to 1, this is 1, and then it goes down to -1, and then back to 0. The 1 and then the -1 determines on your cone of your speaker, like whether it's going in or out. So when it goes to 1, the cone of your speaker is outwards. That's telling your cone of your speaker to go out. And when it goes to -1, it's telling the cone of your speaker to go inwards. Pretty sure that's right. It might be a little bit different or a little more details to that. But yeah, depending on where you are in this graph here will determine where your speaker's at. So if it's like right here, it'll be at like, or right here, it'll be at like 0.5. And your speaker will be like, your cone will be like halfway out. So that's kind of explaining that. But with phase cancellation, it's when the speaker is told to be at two positions that cancel each other out and make no movement. So we could do this with, I could do this with sine wave or saw wave. So we have a regular saw wave, right? And I'm gonna, so right now the phase is where the waveform starts. So I can have the waveform start, at this position and then loop, because this is just a loop and it's just gonna, this is just happening really fast. So if I can change where the loop starts, well, it starts and ends at this point. So if I choose, let's say the beginning, and this says where you want the randomness in the phase to be, around this point, I'm going to set it to nothing, and I'm going to have another waveform, another saw, and we can play them both at the same time, right? Let's remove the phase, and they're both starting in the same position. So they sound fine. But if I take this waveform and I say, like, I'm just going to edit this real quick. Processes, I think it's called horizontally. There we go. So now, if everything's right and the volumes are the same, I hit a note, I'm literally hitting a note, and I get nothing at all. That's because the phases are completely opposite. So if I take 1, so at this point it's at 0.5, right? But then at this point it's at negative 0.5. So what's 0.5 plus negative 0.5? 0. It's telling the speaker cone to not move at all. So that's phase cancellation. That's the way I think of it. So that's the next thing in my notes. The next thing I have here says shift of frequencies low versus high notes. I talked about that earlier. I'm gonna go through resonance real quick. So here's our saw wave. Our saw wave sounds pretty good. Watch what happens when I put a filter on it. So a filter this is kind of a demonstration of what frequencies in this frequency spectrum we're going to get rid of. So we're going to get, this is the lower content, which is at the bottom here, and this is the higher content, which is the top here. So this is kind of telling you, okay, well, keep all these here and then slowly start cutting off the higher frequencies. We can see that, like, we're getting the low content and then the higher stuff is kind of cut off. We can move this up if we want more higher content. And then if we put it all the way up, we pretty much get all the content. That little tiny bit is getting somewhat reduced a little bit. And a cool effect I like is when you take the panning, you can get a cool stereo effect when you only do this to the left or right. It's kind of like mid-side EQ a little bit. And it's not going to 100% show here, but when I pan it hard left, you can definitely tell the difference between your left and right ear. So right now I can definitely tell that I only hear it in my right ear. But if I go like here, yeah, I feel like I hear more higher frequency content over here. Let's do it. Well, maybe that's not a good example, but it does help the stereo field a little bit. To be honest, I'm not 100% certain about the panning. I'll have to look into it myself. So if I add resonance, it's kind of like accentuating or giving, like having those frequencies in that specific area be a little louder. So I play the note, you kind of see that little peak. This spectrum here is almost representing this filter. If I play noise, you can really tell the difference. Actually, I think that'd probably be the best thing to do. It's gonna have like almost a 1-to-1 to the way the filter looks. That's a good way to, if you don't know what a filter is doing and you can't see a visual representation, a good thing to do is just play some noise and then look at what the noise looks like, and then that's what the filter looks like for the most part. So let's put some noise through here, and it's literally replicating that right there. Let's turn up the drive so it's a little louder. You can see some lower stuff getting through here. I don't know why the sub got turned up so loud. Then if I move this, see how it's literally almost a one-to-one replicating what's happening. And if I do another type of filter, so I do a high pass, it's cutting off the lows. Let's do a little bit of a steeper. So the 6, the numbers represent like how steep it is. So let's go to 24. Now it's a little steeper than before. We can see even with this high pass, some of this other content is still getting through. And then even if I add the resonance, like I said before, we're making those specific frequencies louder. You can see even it's here too. The red is louder. We can see that being moved. I'm sorry. We can see that, I don't know if red is louder, but we can see those, that resonance right here. Yeah, we can literally see, we're almost drawing something with the resonance right here. Whereas when I don't add that, it's not as clear. It's almost like outlining where it goes. Anyways, enough on that. So, next thing I have is effects of resonance on sound. I think I did that. So, next thing I want to get into is, this is all just random unorganized things. So 30 hertz. So for whatever reason, most sound systems don't play below, you can't really hear anything below 30 hertz. So most people, they just cut off around 30. Another strange thing you might notice is that if your mix sounds weird and strange, you're like, why is it muddy? And no matter what I do, it just sounds muddy. Well, when I talked about phase, how things can cancel each other out, even though you can't hear something being played, it can still cancel other frequencies out in the frequency spectrum, even if you can't audibly hear the frequencies, or if they're not even being played through the speakers. So if you cut off these low ends that are still present but not being heard or even being played, maybe your speakers can't even play the 30 hertz, it'll still have an effect on the sound. So cutting off those frequencies can actually have a big effect and clean up that little bit of muddiness. Another thing is sometimes we usually cut off, this is kind of getting into mastering a little bit, I guess. A little bit. It's usually a high cut, I don't remember exactly where, but there's a point when it's just so high that it just hurts your ears. And along with since I'm kind of in the point of mastering, the cool thing that people usually do is they like to separate the sub, the kick. Usually different instruments and parts have different ranges, and we like to try to make it to where when you're mixing, you like to try to make it so that each instrument has a part in the frequency spectrum, and it's okay if they kind of go, if some frequencies from one instrument go into the frequencies that are part of another instrument, and part of those what we call overtones of each instrument make up what makes up that sound. But sometimes there's too much of those frequencies in one sound, and they clash with another one. So you like to use EQ for mixing to make sure that those don't spill into the content of the other things that we don't want to get in the way of the other instruments. And on a master, sometimes what you can do is, like, if the bass is around here, and let's say, I don't know, there's some other content going on here, you can accentuate kind of like that instrument isolation by like creating small little notch filters in between the areas you know that your instruments are going to be in. So you can do like small little cuts like this. So again, with EQing, if you have a kick, let's get a kick here. And then I know this might go. One doesn't sound bad actually, just 808. Brought it to channel 1. And a common thing in dubstep is to cut off the lows. And this is actually kind of too high. Because we remember when I was saying we want to leave room for each instrument. Well, this kick has way too much sub, and we want to not have. We know that we want in dubstep we want a sub and a kick, and we don't want them to really interfere. Well, one thing we can do is sidechain, but another thing we can do is just cut off those lower content. I like to have a peak around 100. I remember Skrillex saying he likes that 200 hertz bump, but if I do that, I think there's like way too much missing at that point, and it just like destroys how the kick sounds. So I like to do like 100 hertz bump. That's my preference. And then if I add a sub, massive is the best in my opinion for subs. Let's just make this a sine wave and make this pattern a little better. Now without the EQ, they're kind of interfering a bit. A lot less interference. We get, look at our frequency spectrum again. You can see where the kick is hitting, around here. See where the sub is hitting, and they're not really conflicting with each other a whole bunch. But it's usually good to have a side chain, so I can get into that. So this is how I do my side chains. Input for them. Input. So this is the, I'm going to set this as the input for the side chain. And with the input, because I'm setting everything to here, this is going to trigger my side chain. So I'm going to not route it out to the master because we don't want to hear anything here. I'm going to set it to here, side chain to this, grab my limiter, turn it to compression mode, set it here, and this will determine, the knee will determine how hard your compression is. So it says, where's the numbers? Yeah, the knee will determine how hard the compression is. The ratio, you can see up here. So that's 3 in, and then it'll turn that into 1 out. So if you want to, this is doing compression, and I'm pretty sure this is doing, think the opposite of compression that I can't think of the name of it. So you get, if you have something, the ratio is 1, if your volume is at like, I don't know, 10 dB, then it's going to come to be 20 dB out with a ratio of 1 to 2. With a ratio of 2 to 1, if it's 20 dB, then it's going to get cut to 10 dB, with the compression. But we want a hard compression because we're gonna use this as a side chain. So send this is from the side chain input. Send our stub to, and let's do this again. A bit less release. And send this, instead of out, put this in the sidechain input. We're gonna start to get some duck in here eventually. Should trigger that. We don't see it working, so maybe it's, there we go. Now we can see the cuts here. You can hear the bass come in and out now. Probably want less release. And if you want to keep the transients, you can have the compression start later, so they tackle determine when the compression starts. And the transients are the very like clicky noise in the beginning, and that can definitely affect your sound. So, having more attack can delay the compressor so that here you can see. So see how it starts right away. It just goes straight down. Now that it's a little bit, it waits a little bit before it goes. And if you set to extreme, you can see it takes a little longer for the compression to start. We're keeping the transients a little bit more. But with the sub, we don't really care about the transients as much. At least I don't. You might, I don't know. It's all based on your preferences and, ears and whatnot. So the hard cut like that, now we're making sure that those the kick isn't interfering with the sub. So it's ducking the sub every time the kick hits. Ducking the sub when the kick hits, yeah. Let's go 100%, the ratio all the way down. And so a little less release. Yeah, so that's what I like to do. And you can mess with these curves here. If you don't like that curve, go for a different one. To me, they all look pretty similar. But yeah. So since I'm on to subs and basses, you have to think that sometimes to perceive loudness, it's all based on not necessarily making things actually louder, but perceived loudness. So there's some of the things you can do is add more frequencies in the frequency spectrum to give you more loudness. And one of the other things is kind of like adding white noise to your sub. So if we add white noise, it's not going to sound good initially, but it's another one of the trusted processes. This is kind of like a filter on the noise. So it's almost like a low pass filter. So I want to kind of cut off a lot of the highs because I don't want it to interfere with the rest of the song. So if we add some white noise and then we just add some distortion afterwards. So the sine wave and the white noise are both being fed into the distortion, and when you do that, it creates a pretty nice effect. There you go. So the right amount of noise. It's a really careful amount of noise. So without. To me, I think it does, in a bigger mix, I think it does really make your sub sound a lot fuller. But again, it's kind of based off, personal preferences and all that. And it can get kind of harsh. You can change. I'm going to change this distortion real quick. See, this is the effect I like. And then you can add any stereo effects to your sub. I don't think it's harmful as long as the main output right here is going to be mono. So if I go here, then it's going to be stereo. If I go this way, now it's mono. Let's go back to the structure. See, that's the noise I like. Without noise, with noise. Without, with. Yeah, I think it adds some really nice textures, I guess. So let me low pass this to make sure that that extra content is going to be seeping through. And it's fine to have, some of it, because then it gives it, fine to have some of it because it kind of gives it that, the quality, the definition to the sound, I guess. So yeah, that's the noise. Another thing, sometimes people like to add, I've heard Steve Dudd talk about this. He likes to add reverb to his kicks, and that was like bizarre to me. But I'm gonna open up Patcher. So I've tried it, and I think it does help, but it's very picky on how you do it. So I'm gonna only do this. I'm gonna high pass this. I'm gonna only add reverb to the high end of this. And this kind of almost is one of those things that might sound better in a mix than it does, just by itself here. You can kind of hear it, but that reverb is too long, so I like to go to a shorter reverb like this maybe. It almost adds that clickiness. That's what I notice. It adds a better transient. If I take this out, it looks the same in the frequency spectrum, but it just sounds. So it looks the same in the frequency spectrum, but it just sounds bigger. And you can kind of, do a little bit more here. So this is the kick. Let's make sure that we're cutting off things that we can cut off. We don't want all these mids because we're going to want other things in our songs. And then let's, there's something else I was going to do. Oh yeah. Some distortion here. Let's do distortion, KHS. I'd like to do some clipping. Let's go to hard clip. And to me, that just sounds a lot better. I'm gonna make this mono again because usually subs, kicks, lower end content is usually two things. They're usually compressed a ton, and they're usually mono, while stuff in the higher ranges are compressed less and not always 100% stereo, but more stereo content in the higher ranges. So a mixing tip there. To me, that sounds amazing. Now let's add a snare. Make it cool. Cool. These all suck. These snares suck. I always, like I said, I always use Modes Audio. And then modify it there. Should figure out how to make my own snares, but one day. I like this one a lot. And normally, so if you want to add more stuff to your mix, if you have shorter kicks and kicks that cut off, a good amount of frequencies, but still sound big, then you can afford to add more to your mix. Whereas if the kick lasts too long, it's going to interfere with other things in your mix. So, cutting it off and making it a little shorter is always a good decision. So now it still sounds big and it still sounds long because of the reverb, but it's shorter and it's going to fit better in the mix. So let's do this. And let's route our snare. I'll do the Control L thing that I just haven't been doing this whole time. Rename this kick. Rename this. Something weird. I noticed the sub is kind of like panned to the left. I think it's because of the asymmetry. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Make sure this is mono as well, just to the heck of it. I'm going to call this low frequency SC. So let's add the snare to the sidechain input as well. You can see that snare is really affecting that sidechain. So sometimes what I like to do on the input is put a limiter. Sometimes I like to put a limiter on the input and set the ceiling, put a noise gate. It's not really a limiter, it's a noise gate, but it's part of the limiter. We only get the compression at the very peak of the sound, but not the decay of the sound. The problem is the snare isn't loud enough to trigger this. So what we should do is turn the snare up, or put this down a little bit. This is without the limiter. That was without the limiter. This is with the limiter. Sounds a little better, but I think the snare is still definitely too long, and it probably still affects the mix and the compression as well. To me, that sounds better. And then I would add something back to the right, rename this reverb. And now we're on the reverb topic. I'll show you what I like to do for reverb. Reverb, usually leave this wet. Where's my snare? Now it sounds bigger because of the reverb, but the problem is it's, you know, way too many frequencies are getting through. It's going to interfere. Those frequencies are going to interfere with other things, so it's usually a good idea to EQ your reverb. EQ your reverb. Take out some of the mids. I don't like how long that reverb is, so do not want bass. And with the snare, sometimes it's good to add some resonance, sometimes no. It just makes it, they're super loud now though with that. Problem is because we're adding so adding high peaks like this is good for sound design, but not always for mixing. So keep that in mind when you're adding like super high stuff. Normally they say for mixing, it's just good to cut. You want to do more cutting than like raise and amplifying frequencies. So, but for sound design, it's a little different. So I'm just going to turn this down so the overall volume isn't really affected. So that's with, this is without. I like the resonance. I think it sounds much better. I'm going to save this as tube tut 1. And if you press Control N, you can just make different saves for your project. I do this. I just keep hitting Control N all the time. So I have a million different versions. And if I mess something up, I can go back to previous versions. It's like a version control, kind of like GitHub, I guess. So let's add this to the playlist. You know, we're making our song now. Look at that. We're making a song. Let's make a drum bus. Dock this to the left, or I mean the right. Oh no, wait, I did mean left. So those are just the things I typically do when I make a song. Sidechain input. So instead of routing this to the master, I'm gonna route this to the drum bus. I'm gonna save because I did something new. I don't know why, I just always do 2 saves. Probably why I end up with like 2,000 saves. But then I end up deleting some after a while. because I don't want 2,000 saves. Let's add some variation to this because it's getting kind of boring. There we go. It's a little cool thing, and I don't like the fact that they're all in one thing. So in one pattern. So I'm gonna split by channel. We got two different. One thing our kick, one for our snare, and one for our. So I don't like that I have something different for the snare. So I'm gonna cut this. Let's put this here. That's sounding pretty dubsteppy, if you ask me. And I'll just repeat that because we're simple. Keep it shrimple. Stupid. We're all stupid sometimes, just admit it. Yay, it's looking more and more like a song, eh? Eh? I'm not Canadian. I don't know why I said that. When it comes to EQing as well, you have to understand that this is a IIR EQ, and that can affect the phases. Remember how I said that phases can phase cancel each other and have cut out other frequencies. So that can't happen with this if you leave it the way it is. But you can change this to linear phase so that doesn't happen. But the problem is if you have linear phase, it's slower. Like the processing is slower than the IIR. But to me, most of the time, it's not really an issue. It doesn't, for the most part, it shouldn't really affect your mix a ton. But if you add tons of EQs, I think it would eventually kind of like get in the way, especially if you're adding a ton of EQs. You might want to consider that linear phase stuff. So let's make our sound. Oh, I don't know what I did there. I didn't want to do that. Let's go to Patcher here. Let's make our dubstep sound. So I'm going to do something very weird. Oh, that's what I like to do. FM sounds are typically really good for dubstep. I want to show you something cool with some more of that phase cancellation. So other than phase, think about phase cancellation, but you can also think about phase cancellation being different for the left and right ear. And if you have something slightly different in the left ear than the right ear, so you can have the same exact thing being played. If you have the same thing being played in both ears, then the stereo effect is gone, right? But if you have the exact same sound, let's say it's the same sound playing the same note, but in the left ear, it has a little more resonance, but in the right ear, it has a little less resonance. Well, that just suddenly makes the sound super wide. But with this, if we change the stereo image with this, so what this is doing is changing the phases and the delay in the left and the right speaker and the volume, and this will feed something. This is the volume of the left channel, and this is changing the left into the right. The left channel into the right, and then this is going to change the right channel into the left. It's a little confusing. And this is, subtract for the sound, or make it negative phase, I think, and this is going to make it positive phase, something like that. So if we just mess with this, it'll start causing frequency spectrums in the stereo field, and it's going to sound really weird. So let's start making that sound. Do a new pattern here. And just start. Oh, because it's not connected, we're not going to hear anything. Let's connect this first. So Oh, didn't want to do that. We're gonna do the same note that our song's in. G is a weird. Okay, we decided with G. We did. Let's put this at default. And I'm definitely going to EQ this because there's a ton of stuff in the higher spectrum that's just annoying. Is super annoying. Some EQ here again. Add this to the low pass. Make this, so this controls the steepness. I don't know if I'd explain that. It's super helpful. So I'm going to make it super steep because I'm doing a sharp cut at the top. It's not attached. That's why it's not doing anything. There we go. All right, EQ to our ear. Cut off those lows. Oh, let's make this a high pass. Because remember I said that systems can't hear below a certain point. And yeah, there we go. That seems good to me. And let's start messing with that stereo field because we can. And when you add the delay between the left and the right speakers, that's called a HAUS effect, I believe. And it can like definitely widen the stereo. But the problem with adding the Haas effect is that it kind of messes with your lows. So what I should be doing is be doing this. So because we want our lows mono, add another stereo imager. And we're gonna turn this down and feed the left to the right so that it's gonna play the left and the right as just being the left. And we're gonna set a low pass because we want our low as mono. A low pass, make it kind of sharp. I always do a high pass and a low pass, just what I do to make sure those the extra lower stuff isn't really coming through. So we got our low pass here. We gotta put it in mono. Then when we look at the sound, you can see that see how it's flat like that? Usually that's a good sign that it's mono, whereas when it's not flat like that, like the left and the right are just kind of equal volume. It's a little harder to tell, but if I start adding stereo effects, you will be able to see now left is a little louder than right. But anyways, this is just making sure our low content is low. And then I'll high pass this. Is mono, I mean. Let's high pass this. Boom. I like that resonance there. So what I could do is let's save 2 saves. That's what I do, I know. So let's add a button or a knob, default, whatever. We gotta activate it. And then, so what is it? Last tweaked, inputs, parameters, last tweaked. Send this to here. What is it doing? Nothing. Is this the right one? Strange. What is it? Band 1 level? It's frequency, not level. There we go. That's There, that's probably it. So let's create some automation for that. And let's place this here. And it's gonna mess with our sub, actually. So I forgot we had a different sub, so let's just take this out. Sounds better. Let's not make this note as long, actually. Creating space in your track allows you to, it's actually better to create gaps in between things so that you can have, one, you have space for other things and you have room. Something doesn't sound impactful if it's playing the same volume all the time, but if you have, you know, loudness and then quietness, it makes the louder things sound louder. That's an interesting noise. Now let's mess with that stereo stuff here. You can really see, so let's loop this. You can kind of see what's happening. See how it's almost creating almost like a phase. And let's add some distortion now. Distortion is awesome. I like Serum's distortion. We don't need this anymore. A little more stereo imaging. I didn't even do distortion yet. And then upwards, up-down compression. Let's add some OTT. So OTT is kind of like multi-band compression, except it controls the regular compressor. When the sound hits a certain threshold, a certain volume or dB, then the compressor will kick in and start turning it down by a certain amount of dB. Well, an upwards down compressor is not only when the volume gets to a certain level, but when it gets below a certain level, then it'll start to kick in too. So that's kind of what, you know, OTT does. It's an up down compressor. To me, it kind of like squarifies the sound, turns it more into a square wave, and so you can kind of see with and without. This is like what everyone adds to every sound. Kind of, to me, the downwards compression kind of like, it can be harsh sometimes. Like it adds a lot of higher frequency content. Without, with, I think also things will just sound better if they're louder. So sometimes you know, comparing things when they're quiet at the same volume is sometimes better. To me, it didn't add a whole lot to the sound. Yeah, I don't think it really did a whole lot. And it's usually probably a good idea to set that also to be sidechained. I just like sidechaining a lot of things. So add this to sidechain. Instead of calling this low frequency sidechain, just call this low sidechain. And gain staging, sometimes it can change your sound if you control the volume here. This is the volume before the mixer, so if you control the volume here, it might have a big effect on your sound before, if you change the volume before it goes to the mixer. Although the thing is there's no effect, so it's not going to do. I mean, there's a limiter, so I usually like my sub around. I really don't have my sub crazy loud. I have it like right there. All right. So Maximus. So let's EQ our drums a little bit. Or EQ and so many things on the screen. EQ and compress our drums a little bit. I'm just listening to what sounds best. I noticed that when you raise around here, the kick just sounds better. I know that can conflict with other things in the sound, but if you had the sidechain, you know, it's going to cut all those other sounds anyways. So I think it's like around the presence. Yeah, around the presence area, like the kick will just sound bigger. And the snare sounds pretty good around here. And I'm gonna, because I'm and what I should really be doing is cutting. So now those sounds are gonna sound louder because well, I could have just did, you know what? What I could have just done is just do this. And then a little bit less, and then turn this down. There we go. Now let's add some Maximus. This is a multi-band compressor. Cool thing about Maximus is you can solo each frequency. So let's solo the lows. Then I'm going to add the sub, the side chain. Nah, I won't do that. Sometimes you want to like add the sub and the drums to the same thing. So let's make another one for sub and drums. I'm gonna name it bus. Oh, well, I made a color. Dock this to the left. So now this is gonna be sent to here. And then so the sub and drum bus. And then Where's the sub? Sub is gonna go. Oh, this gets confusing, doesn't it? Let's make a separate side chain for the sub. And for some reason, this got a lot wider. It's 8. So this is for the sub. Okay, set the side chain of this track. And send this to, I'm just gonna send this to the drum bus. And then, where's the drums? Drums can just be head out. So put this back to where it was. So let's name this drum and bus. So let's do some Maximus here. So I'm going to solo each frequency and compress accordingly. And now because we cut 3 dB, I'm going to gain 3 dB, 3. And I'm going to put this merge so it's in mono. And because we don't care about the transients, I'm going to put the attack up here. We do care about the transients, but I'm going to put the attack a little lower. Highs, we kind of care about the transients a little bit more. We're getting so many dB here, so I'm going to cut a lot, go down a bunch. This way it's louder, longer. No, it's the post actually louder. All right, I'm gonna take a bathroom break and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. So Another thing to mention is that I've been kind of making music for a while. After you are in DAW for so long and you're listening the same noise over and over again, your ears can get kind of fatigued, and then things will start to sound bad that aren't bad, or things will sound good that aren't good. And it's good to take breaks. I think they say every 2 hours. It does definitely help. It's one of those things that, like, unfortunately, I mean, you can't just sit down for like ever and just you know make make things for an indefinite amount of time. It's not going to really be beneficial. So yeah, I'm reading my notes. What other things to cover? I covered a lot of things already, to be honest. Oh yeah, some a useful thing to do. And in this song it might not be useful, but sometimes to add gate to your reverb, because you can always think of like, what can I cut out of the song? What can I afford to get rid of and still sound good? So the more you get rid of, the more you can afford to have your mix sound a little impactful, I guess, because it's all about changes in the sound. So when there's more things that are when there's quiets and there's gaps, it makes the bigger things sound better. And when there's things that aren't there, it makes the things that are there sound better too. So that's also a good thing to think about as well. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on this song, obviously. Um, Something else I want to cover that I can't think of at the moment. I don't think so. I'm reading my note. Oh, 808s. 808s. That was quick. So I see a lot of people like kind of put this to it's 11, sure. Why not? See a lot of people using 808 samples, but I think you can make pretty good 808s in Massive. I'm such a big proponent of Massive. I didn't realize I was until I started making videos, and I'm like, wow, I like Massive way more than I thought. Yeah, here's the visual glitches again. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know what that's all about. Like, take it off the screen and put it back. It kind of fixes it. It's weird. So 808s, let's go. So we got a kind of a little easy pattern here. Let's turn this into a sine wave. And mess with the envelope a little bit. Distortion. But yeah, a different envelope for the pitch. Let's go up like 2 octaves. Gives it that punchiness. But the decay really definitely affects the 808 sound. And then I add my distortion. I could add some white noise if I wanted, and I could volume automate it with this. Add a little bit. So to me, that sounds pretty good already. Got some sign shaping if I wanted. Problem is, when it gets that crazy, you want to maybe not have as much decay. Add some slides. Problems with massive, you can't, it's hard to add that the slides. So to me, yeah, I think this is already a pretty good 808 and I didn't do a whole lot. Let's get rid of all this. So now what I'm going to do is, what you can do is right click it. And actually I'm just going to do the one thing right here. And I'm going to render it as an audio clip. So we can mess with it a little further if we wanted. So now we go to our audio, this audio clip, 808. And to me, I'd rather just, we don't have all those crazy things. So I'm going to add it again here. So now we have all this extra stuff we can add to the 808. Make a little pattern here. You can do a lot of cool stuff with, just samples by themselves. Make the pattern again. Except it needs to be, I don't remember how long it was. Whoa. Why is there something else playing? Oh, it's looped. I don't know how that. Delete. There we go. I think it automatically added the loop when I, put this on and then I rendered it as an audio clip. There we go. A little bit longer. You can edit it further, normalize it. Add more effects if I wanted. If I press Control while, dragging it out, we can finely tune it. That freaking, that ring mod is doing wonders to this freaking kick. And if I want to do that infinite 808 thing, I could add the loop points back here. At here, I guess. Snap to zero crossing. Yeah, it is. So set loop, put it back in. Use loop points. Oh shoot. Not bad. Oof. Heard people do this, but I don't think this is the best way to do this. The problem is we want one cycle of the 808, so we're gonna have to guess what one waveform cycle is, and I'm just gonna guess that's it. Sounds okay. The ring mod's making it a little weird. There we go. We got some infinite 808s, infinite, baby. Thing is does it end? No, it lasts for the whole thing. That's kind of annoying. There's a way to stop that. Maybe just because it's so long. Let's cut it a little bit. Huh. Well, anyways, That's all I really want to cover that I can. Did want to go in a little bit of mid-side EQ, so I guess I'll cover that a little bit. So I didn't explain it before as well as I'd like. So if I go into filter EQ, sometimes, remember I said how like the lows need to be mono or whatever. Sometimes it's good to like, EQ differently for your mids and your sides. Usually, lower content is in the mids and higher content is in the highs. So if you like high pass the sides and then low pass the mids, sometimes I can make things sound a little clearer and less muddy, I guess, or just more clear, I guess is the word. All right, so yeah, that's everything. Hopefully you learned something and you got a lot. Oh wait, there's more. It's like an infomercial. There's something else I want to cover. So many things. 3x. So I'm going to make a short chord with this. But that's kind of like going over time. I want to show plate reverb. So we have this sound that with the BPM a little bit slower. Control B, 1 bar. New bar? Yeah. Watch what happens. Watch what plate reverb does. Almost like smears. It's almost like a smearing effect. So on Serum, we have a plate reverb. Let's go to reverb. So it's just regular reverb. Cool, but watch the plate reverb. You notice how that makes like a drone sound? And you could just take that and resample it and make it into a drone. So let's render his audio clip. Hopefully it keeps the effects. I think it does when you do that. And then we could just make this into a drone here. We don't want the beginning part. You can take the loops out. Actually, I want the loops. See what it sounds like looped. There's a little bit of clicking at the beginning. If I can get it to start and stop at a similar point, it'll be less clicking. Or not. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right because I can edit it later. And we're going to take this sound, put it in here. We'll put it in a stretch. And to get rid of the clickiness, what I could do, add something like gross beat to the big. Oops. Let's make a pattern with it. Why is it not re-triggering? Sounds like it's not re-triggering for some reason. Huh. Oh, it's because the gross beat's on. So let's add a smooth curve. No, smooth. So we know it's every what? It's like that. Click is like right here. Let's get rid of that. Got rid of the click. You get a cool pad droney-ish type of sound. To be honest, let's just edit this further with. Wish there was a way to get rid of the click. Well, I'll figure that out one day. Every time you let go of the note, what if I just. This is annoying. What if I fade? That's it. The crossfade. Oh my goodness, that fixed the clickiness. A little bit. That completely fixed the clickiness, the crossfade thing. Well, I don't know how long I've been recording for, but there you go. There's some tips, tricks, stuff.